Hello, folks. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and I have another great show planned for us. We're going to be looking at creepy encounters. Well, we're going to be looking at, meaning strange things in the dark. Well, if you're out in the woods or in the dark of night, you meet something out there, what happens? We're going to be seeing aliens and ghosts and all the weird things that happen.
Well, if you're out in the woods or in the dark of night, you meet something out.
The people encounter when they're out in the dark. So we'll look at that. But first, let me show off some artwork from my own graphic novel, Scumdogs. Okay, here's one of the variant covers for my upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs. This is the extreme '90s cover. This cover I did to harken back to the comic books of the '90s. It has pretty much every character that will be appearing in my graphic novel on it. Now, the Scumdogs themselves, well, they're supervillains out to take over the world. My book is a parody. Scumdogs is a parody comic book of all the cartoons we all know and love when we were growing up. You'll see characters that will remind you of things you read back when you were young. Now, the Scumdogs, they used to be pro athletes. They competed in the Scumdog Spurts. This is basically this was for superhumanly powerful monsters as the athletes, the Scumdog Spurts. You had to transform yourself into a Scumdog. You had to transform yourself into a monster. See, they're scum and dogs for trading their humanity for money, because you had to do that in order to compete in the Scumdog Sports. So not exactly the nicest guys around. But what happens when they get banned from sports? Well, the Scumdogs then try to take over the world. They're led by, my two main characters are Deathmug and Buick Starpoon. Deathmug is the leader of the Scumdogs, and Buick Starpoon is the guy with the pink pompadour hair. Now, Deathmug is as I said, the purple guy with the metal skull mask. He has various aspects of, he's basically an arrogant dictator out to rule the world and stuff like that. He has various aspects of villains from 80s cartoons. You can see in the way he looks. He looks like the villains from G.I. Joe, G.I. Joe and stuff. Like Cobra Commander, he's got a metal mask. Like Serpentor, he's got gold on him. And he's purple, like the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So you get the idea that he's the leader of the Scumdogs. Well, his archenemy, Buick Starpoon, this is the guy with the pink pompadour hair. He's basically a G.I. Joe parody, mostly of Duke from G.I. Joe, but also the space hero kind of archetype character, or rather space opera character, mostly of Zapp Brannigan, or can't remember his name. Zapp Brannigan. Why do I keep wanting to say that? Captain Kirk, Captain Kirk from Star Trek, James T. Kirk from Captain Kirk, Buzz Lightyear, those kinds of characters, as well as Buck Rogers, mainly the space hero kind of character. But because he's a G.I. Joe parody, he's, a parody of a G.I. Joe character, he's got a military specialty. In fact, every member of his team in the Space Forces has a military specialty because they're G.I. Joe parodies. Mm-hmm. And Buick Starpoon's is that he's a captain in the Space Forces. Sorry, I was trying to get that out as quickly as possible. Can't remember all the characters I like to talk about here. So you get but Buick Starpoon is basically also a parody of the military kind of character as well. Those arrogant soldier type characters that are always think they're right and have bull heads. He hates Deathmug, and Deathmug hates him because they're both arrogant, overbearing douche. They're overbearing. They're both arrogant, overbearing, assholes. Now let's look at the other members of his team. Over here we have this guy with the mohawk. His name is Roadhog. He's another member of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. His name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he's an army guy. Before he joined up with his captain, he was part of the army. Now, we have this bald guy with a gun down here. His name is Beach Pounder. His military specialty is that he's a Marine. But now he works for Buick Starpoon and stuff like that. And then we have this guy back here in the red uniform driving his vehicle, firing off his weapons. His name is Blast Tank. He's a heavy vehicle specialist, a tanker. Now, this cover is one of 3 different variant covers you'll be able to back when Indiegogo goes live. And stuff like that. So you get the idea over there. Let's go look at Miss Breasty Melons. Miss Breasty Melons is another member of the Wild Rangers. It's the name of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. She works directly under Buick Starpoon, and she hates him. She was only put on the Wild Rangers because her superiors in Space Forces needed someone to babysit them. Because while the Wild Rangers go out and fight the scum dogs and save the universe, they just cause a lot of damage. So they hoped by putting Girl Friday on the team that she could basically babysit them and get them to do their jobs better. And she hates her job because she thinks her career in the military is over. Now, by the way, folks, hit that like button for me. It really helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please go share this video on social media, as well as hit that bell. Hit the part of the bell that gives you all future notifications, and please share this video out on social media. Share it out on Twitter. Share it out on Facebook. Now let's look at Hair Metal Doctor. Hair Metal Doctor is a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe. A mad scientist, but my mad scientist here has been crossed over with a hair metal musician because I think that's awesome. He thinks of all the mad gadgets and machines and scumdogs use to try and take over while trying to use to do their evil deeds. But he also does it while being a hair metal musician. Now let's look at Miss Breasty Melons. Miss Breasty Melons is a parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe, but unlike the Baroness, she's a party girl who only wants to have fun. She only became a villain just to have fun. Now we looked at this. This is some fun here in this on this artwork. Be ready when my Indiegogo is up on when my graphic novel is up on Indiegogo. Go back it. It's not done yet, folks. I'm still working on the book, but when it is, go and back it. You'll love this book. All right. Let's exit out of these, and well, as I said, we're going to be looking at dark encounters tonight. People who have spooky encounters with the unknown and not known out in the dark. Could be in this. These encounters can happen anywhere and at any time. So we'll be looking at that tonight. So get ready and hit that like button for me because it helps me fight the algorithm. But first, let's go shoot some art. Let's go look at Indiegogo real quick. Earthbound, coming from Nasser. Nasser Rabadi here. The action-packed conclusion. Earthbound looks like a great book. It's made 19,712. Let me refresh this to make sure it's still up. Getting there, it was. Earthbound, 29,505. Ooh, basically 30,000 days in the first 29 days. That's not bad. That's a lot of money right off the bat. Nasser should be happy. This book looks awesome. I wonder if you can get the first one as well. Maybe. Earthbound Part 2. Earthbound Part 1 OG printing $40. Earthbound Part 2 plus sketchbook $40. Earthbound Part 2 hardcover. Earthbound Part 2 $25. Earthbound Parts 1 and 2 $50. Okay, that's not bad. So there's that as well. That looks good. This looks like a good-looking book. All right. The artwork looks pretty good. Go back to this book. You'll enjoy it. There's a Downcast 3, which has made $35,378 with 3 hours left. Not bad. Probably going into demand, but you might want to get on it quick, folks. Elvira meets Vincent Price has made $16,775. The Adventures of Tellus in Outer Space has made $2,222. Let's see. Shadow Century Book 2, Belly of the Beast, has made $10,173. Only Death Can Save Us has made quite a bit of money. Creed Reimaginary 1 and 2 has made $114,649. That's doing well. The books on Indiegogo look great. Each of them is doing great as well. Let's see more stuff. Alien Alamo has made $86,431. It's doing good there. Cardinal Book 1 Cult has made $565. Let's see. The Relentless Tin Soldier has made $590 with 56 days left. Not doing bad there with some great looking artwork as well. The books on Indiegogo are great. Go and back them, folks. You'll really enjoy it. Now, I might come back to that later, but let's go look at some weird, spooky encounters in the dark with very strange cave encounters with the unexplained. Now, feel free to leave me a few chats, folks, because I want to hear your opinions on where I'm looking. I want to hear your ideas of what is out there in the world. So go, leave me a few chats. Of all places that lend themselves to spooky tales of the strange caves and caverns must surely rank high. After all, these are realms of domains of hidden away beneath the earth, under our feet in the darkness we rarely think about. These are places of eternal blackness, untouched by the light or the outside world, forever bathed in shadow and little explored. It seems as though it should be no surprise that these gloomy places have managed to draw in reports of something very bizarre, and here we will look at some very weird reports of strange creatures, aliens, and others lurking deep down in the ground. Well, beneath our feet. Ha ha ha! A really quite strange encounter comes to us from the sites of phantoms and phantoms. It concerns an eyewitness in another country. He calls himself Gregor and says that this happened to him while he was exploring at an obscure cave in the area of Upper Austria that is traditionally known for its vast salt mines. Gregor himself is a seasoned caver who has explored caves and caverns throughout his country, the Czech Republic and Poland, since 1988. So he is not new to this and very inexperienced. In May of 2011, he claims that he was in a shallow, treacherous cave that had only recently been discovered in the range of foothills near the east bank of Halslater Lake. As he made his way through the still darkness, he claims that he had heard voices in the shadowy gloom ahead, which stopped just as suddenly as they had begun. All right, let's see what else he gets into. Well, let's see. He said these passageways were at some points so very small that he had to crawl through them, and as he did, he intermittently heard those voices. Although it sounded like murmuring with no clear words, after some time he came to a larger chamber which had openings and tunnels so smooth they looked as if they had been carved out by some vast machine. In this chamber there was a very definite stench of what smelled like rotted meat, and there was an odd red iridescence to the floor. When he passed his light over it, as he examined this strange phenomenon, things would suddenly get very bizarre and frightening, as the witness says. When I knelt down to collect a sample, I again heard voices coming from one of the passageways. At this point, I was terrified and started to hurry back through the narrow cave. After I squeezed back several meters, I was able to turn my head just enough to look back into the dark chamber. A yellow light slowly made its way into the chamber from the left, opening the chamber. Then there were several yellow lights following the first. The lights moved through the opening into the chamber, then back through the opening on the right. I was able to see the beings. The sight sent fear throughout my body. I was actually paralyzed. The creatures were humanoid in stature, but these were not human. Each varied in height, but all looked the same. Muscular lizards that walked like men. Walked like humans. There is not a better term I can use to identify these beings. These creatures were wearing dark-colored full-body uniforms that extended and covered the feet. I couldn't tell the exact color of the skin, but each had a pronounced muzzle. Long tails were very prominent and swiftly swayed back and forth. As they moved forward, the arms and legs were massive. I could detect the muscular through the uniforms. These were voices also as if they were talking to each other. The voices actually sounded human, though it could not detect the language. Possibly 20 or more of these creatures as they walked single file through the chamber and into the other opening. When I conceived it was safe to move, I quickly withdrew from the cave. I think I may have been in shock because I barely remember anything that happened from that point until I reached my office. I decided to keep a private journal regarding my encounter, but I have not discussed it with anyone else. My colleague, who have originally found the cave, told me that he has explored the cave since my encounter, but never mentions anything about the chamber other than passageways or bizarre beings. What was going on here? What were these things? Another case from Phantoms and Monsters. Phantoms, from a witness who says this happened in the U.S. state of Missouri, summer of 1995. He describes himself as ex-military and says at the time of his bizarre experience, he'd been living near Elk Ridge, Missouri. had learned of spelunking in the military and had taken into it as a baby, so it was not unusual for him to go exploring caves, tunnels in the area. And indeed, back at the time, he was involved with a spelunking group who explored caves and cavern systems throughout Missouri and Arkansas. So on this day, he had been exploring himself at a cave in Camden County, Missouri, which he describes as very little. All right. Or mapped, as he made his way through the gloom, he came across a series of chambers which he followed. So no one really has been in this cave before, huh? Sounds interesting. Maybe, I guess, assumed to be the end of the cave, and that was when he heard, odd rustling sounds coming from an opening near the top of the chamber he was in. He says, what happened next? I assumed the sounds were bats, didn't pay much attention to it, but after a while I heard motorized sounds and talking. I stood and listened for several minutes, wondering what was on the other side of the chamber. The opening was about 10 feet above me. I maneuvered my way up to the opening, which was flat and narrow, but big enough for me to get a decent look into it. As I positioned myself to the point of the opening, I started to see light on the other end of the passageway. It was only a few feet long, but it was just too narrow for me to move through. As I looked through the opening, there was very warm draft of air hitting my face, as well as the air had a very acid vinegar-like odor. There were a very large and well-lit room with limestone walls. I noticed a small vehicle that looked like a golf cart, but it was very low to the ground without wheels. I continued to observe until I started to hear voices were getting louder and nearer. Something was making its way toward the vehicle. I had to rub my eyes because I didn't believe what I was looking at. The creature, because it was not a man, stood about 7 feet and had a brown scaly skin. The head was shaped like a human with a flat nose, but there was no ears or hair. Top of the head had a slight scaly ray of ridge that extended down the back of the neck. From what I could see, it had lips of regular size, eyes. The arms are very long and muscular with a human-like hands. It also had a massive 4-by-foot tail that it tempered to a point. It was dressed in gold metallic outfit with long pants. Its shoes are also carried an oval pack attached to its back. Watched as this thing was looking at something on the vehicle. I had a high-speed camera, which I used to document my cave explorations. I was able to obtain a few distorted images of the being. For some reason, while I was taking photos, the creature stopped and turned looking in my direction. I'm not sure if it heard me, but I definitely knew my presence. It then made a terrible hissing sound as it continued to look in my direction. That was enough for me. I quickly started making a beeline out of the cave. When I reached the entrance, I was shaking and hyperventilating. I finally reached my vehicle and drove home. I continued to explore caves in the area. I have heard stories of people encountering strange underground beings, but I have never disclosed my experience. A few years after my experience, I went back to the cave. I was unable to, near it, since the area is now government property. I can assume that I witnessed something that I was not supposed to see. It pains me to think what secrets are kept, and, they're not talking about, or they're not telling us. Well, that's a very interesting story, folks. Very, very interesting. Got any other ideas about what these things are? Any other encounters? Very strange account with some other sort of human. It comes from 78. In 78. And Toronto, in 1978 in Toronto, Canada, here within a dark confines of the various networks of tunnels and caves under this sprawling metropolis, 51-year-old man known as Ernest had, strange and frightening encounter in August of that year. The witness claims he had been out searching for the neighborhood for a missing kitten, looking for a litter he had been raising with his wife when he had stumbled across a tunnel entrance. And I read this story before, but this is part of this encounter as well, because I don't remember. So let's read this story. Get a flashlight and investigate when it led perhaps to find his missing cat. In the process, he claims that he penetrated around 10 feet into the murk and suddenly came across a creature that looked somewhat like a long and thin monkey around 3 feet in height, with large teeth and covered in gray fur, unsettling eyes which peered out of the darkness from deep sockets, described as being bright orange and slanted to make the whole ordeal even more horrific. Ernest reported the creature actually spoke to him. He would say of the odd events, "I saw a living nightmare that I'll never forget. It said, go away," in a hissing voice. Then it took off down a long tunnel, off to the side. I got out of there as fast as I could. I was shaking with fear. Ernest would later grudgingly tell newspaper of his frightening experience after being encouraged by a friend to do so. He refrained from giving his last name out of fear that he would be ridiculed. Staff from the Sun even went as far as to accompany Ernest to the location of the strange sighting in March of 1979. They found that indeed this was the entrance to a cave at the end of a passageway between houses, which led to a narrow tunnel. I might have read this article before, but I know I read this part, but I think we've covered some other stuff as well. A tunnel that dropped off into the gloom sharply and was surmised to lead to the unseen sewer systems down below. When they investigated the tunnel, they did not see any strange creature, but they did find the maimed carcass of a cat half buried in the ground. Sewer officials were questioned about what Ernest had perhaps seen, and an employee gave the rather ominous statement. Guys who work on the surfaces don't know what it's like down there. Who work on the surface just don't know what it's like down there. It's a whole different world. Who would have thought a few years ago that people would live in sewers? Yet that's what they found in New York City a few years back. I don't know what Ernest saw down there. I'll tell you one thing. If he could get in there, sure as hell, he wouldn't want to go down alone. Want to, huh? The so-called Cabbagetown monster is truly bizarre, and that no other such a report like it has come in. It is hard to say what the creature in question could possibly be, especially considering that it is allegedly spoke concerning the witness himself. Friends and family said that he was an honest and reliable man, not prone to making up tall tales, and some reporters who interviewed him said that he seemed earnest and honestly scared and reluctant to tell the tale at the time. What he did see down there if anything, we may never know. One idea of what the Cabbagetown tunnel monster could have been, Cabbagetown monster, was not a tunnel dweller per se, but rather some cryptid from above the ground taking refuge or shelter within the tunnel. The region where it was sighted has long had accounts from the natives. Race of small, hairy humanoids inhabited areas near waterways were called the Mi'kmaq something. Perhaps something like this could have found a home down in the tunnel. We will probably never know. From Cryptozoology News, we have an outlandish report from Homeland Country in eastern Tennessee. A woman who claims she and her husband decided to explore a cave they had discovered in the out in the rural property. She says that as they looked around around some of the chambers, her husband spotted a strange dwarf Bigfoot creature. Stood 4 feet tall and was covered with thick brown hair, except its first face, which was hairless and very human-looking. What she explained she saw. We both froze in the shocked state that took in each other's details. Before I ran, I stood less than 2 feet up, face to face with it. He was scared as I was. It can climb cave walls and freeze in place. The species could be a cousin of Bigfoot, but smaller. It had short legs, heavy paws with claws that are flattened on the end, a lot like a fisher's body with a human white man's face. The same witness also claims that she found within the same cave a dusty old 16th century document where it was basically on it an old Germanic allegedly by an Italian explorer, which is just as bad as bizarre as discovering a Bigfoot in the cave. Another report that it really is hard to classify was given by a Reddit user who says he found something very unusual while exploring a cave he found on a camping trip in Flagstaff, Arizona. Well, he went into the cave along with his wife and father-in-law, and things would soon get weird, the witness says. I went into the cave and had my army crawl about 20 feet before hitting a large opening that had dropped too far dark to see the bottom. While I was poking around, I held my small flashlight over the experience to try and see the other side of the cave. There I saw what looked like 2 foot long stalactites that were off translucent white. When I attempted to look closer, my light died. I had my wife bring me a larger flashlight and shined it where I thought the stalactites were, and they were gone. I looked around the cave and to see where they could have gone, and the moment I think I saw them, this new flashlight died. I asked my wife to bring me a cell phone, as mine was dead from camping. My father-in-law offered his, and I began to film the cave. I filmed for about 12 minutes. Well, for a few minutes. Well, 12 minutes. And then I thought I saw this creature again, and immediately the camera stopped filming on its own. Would have to be some sort of cave-dwelling creature that was very silent and very good at climbing, and somehow was the ability to affect flashlight cameras. It was very strange. We dubbed the creature Timmy. Timmy. Okay. What is this going on with these reports of disease? What sort of mysterious forces are at work down in the dark? Well, who knows? Very interesting, though, and we're coming to some very interesting stuff. Have 2 likes there. If you could, folks, if you have not hit the like button yet, please do so. It really helps me fight the algorithm. Likes there. If you could, folks, if you have not hit the like button yet, please do so. It really helps me fight the algorithm. Yeah, feel free to leave me a chat. If you could, folks, if you have not hit the like button yet, please do so. I'm trying to figure out this. Got that there. I read you that article, but apparently that's very strange. Very, very strange. Did something go wrong with my streaming? Very, very weird. Let me go back over here. Let me stop share screen for a moment. Share screen again. Do this. I mean, I was waiting for chats to appear, so I was waiting for that to happen. So let me go back over here. Here we go. I mean, I read you a story. You didn't miss much. I read a story to you from an article I was doing here. Let's go look at some more. Let's go look at some more encounters in the dark, huh? I think I read that article to you before, folks. Sorry about that. Let's go look at some. I have a few articles up here. Bizarre encounters of mysterious tall like that. Truly bizarre encounters of very close encounters with Bigfoot. Could do that as well. Strange alien forest entity encounters by an alleged search and rescue worker. Let's look at this, folks. Out in the dark, out in the forest. The woods are a weird place. The internet can be even weirder. Wilderness there can be even weirder, huh? There are countless forums of people have come across a wide variety of bizarreness out in the wilderness, and many of these may certainly raise eyebrows, but are still compelling nevertheless. One poster on the several Reddit forums who has come out of the woodwork in recent years is a person who claims to be a search and rescue worker and has quite a few tales to tell of encountering completely terrifying paranormal entities in the woods that are really hard to classify. In one case, the poster, who calls himself Search and Rescue, involves some sort of hairy entity that seems to have abducted a child only to vanish. He says that this happened on a call to search for a missing little girl and her brother who had gone out into the woods near their home to pick berries with their parents and suddenly vanished off the face of the earth. The parents apparently looked away for just a second, only to look back to find both of the children missing. Things would get pretty weird, but from there, as the poster explains, he and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me. It really helps me fight the algorithm. Because the more people who can see my hit that like button, it helps me fight the algorithm. It means more people will see my content. As well as please go hit that bell and hit the part of the bell that gives you all future notifications. And please go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. Both of them were missing around the same time. As I get back to this article here, their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time, both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked her where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said she gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in the area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall, covered in hair like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of him. This particular report is interesting in that a few of the elements mentioned become almost legendary among some of the stranger missing person cases, like those covered in, David Pilates' Missing 411 books. Here we have the mention of the berries, which is an odd detail that pops up in quite a few vanishings, as well as the mention of some sort of hairy animal or beast man. Also surprisingly common in some of these cases, the poster also gives some reports of what can only be described as a faceless men, which are even more bizarre than the bear man. One strange report is he has the tail that reads as, well, go and listen to it. Well, let's look at it. I was teamed up with another officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who had come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to. We ended up having to do some Huh. That's very interesting right there. So we have another report of this guy basically looking for someone and can't find him. Then they come across some faceless people. Is that it? What do you think, folks? What had they encountered? What could they have encountered here? If you're wondering, folks, we're talking about dark encounters we're talking about strange and frightening encounters in the dark, things that people encounter out in the night or in the woods or out when they're alone. We're wondering about them, what these people have encountered. Very strange here. What do you think this guy's encountered? He says something about. We read a few stories that are very interesting. So we have to wonder, what could this guy have encountered? What could he have really encountered? I mean, we already looked at a few things where these people encountered monsters and very weird things out where they were out exploring and they saw these things that really frightened them. And I have to say, it's all very interesting. But what do you have? A few ideas? Leave me a few chats. I want to hear your ideas on what these guys have encountered. What do you think that could possibly be, huh? I mean, honestly, I can take a few minutes to talk about this. I mean, people encounter these things, and a lot of these tales have similarities, which is also very strange as well. Not just small details; they just keep popping up. But details that keep popping up in other people's stories over and over again. So, what could that possibly be as well? All right, let's get back to this article. When he hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where he was. We feared we'd found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine when he'd gotten to the top. A man had been there. He said that. The guy had no climbing equipment and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. He had no face, huh? It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and laying out these horrible muffled screams. The story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there. Another report from what seems to have been a similar faceless man was relayed to the poster by a friend and colleague who was at the time painting an information sign doing a darkened forest road. As he went above his chore, he claimed that a man had come up to the bottom of the ladder and called up to ask for directions to the nearest campsite. The colleague said there was one around 4 miles down the road, but he never took his eyes off his work to see what the stranger looked like. Throughout the whole exchange, the witness said they had been overcome with a deep sense of creeping unease, and things would get steadily more bizarre from there. He explains what happened next. The second he came up and talked to me, the hairs on my neck stood up, but I wasn't sure why. I just heard this really uneasy feeling about the whole thing. I wanted to finish painting and get out of there. I feared maybe part of it was that I couldn't turn around to look at him, but something just felt off. There was also the weird smell floating around even before the guy talked to me, a kind of like old period blood. Old blood, huh? I had looked around to see what was causing it, but I didn't find anything. So I waited for the guy to walk away, but I didn't hear him leave, which made me think he was just standing there and watching me. So I asked again if I could do anything for him. He didn't answer. I knew he was there because I hadn't heard him leave. So I did this awkward turn on the ladder to look down and see what he was doing. Now I admit it could have been my brain effed up, but I swear to you, Russ, for a split second when I turned around, that effort didn't have a face. Like he had no face. It was almost concave and totally smooth. And I just about had a effing heart attack because I couldn't even wrap my brain around what I was seeing. I think I started to say something, but there was this kind of pop inside my head, and suddenly he was just a normal looking guy. I must have looked weird because he asked me if I was okay, and I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. He asked me about the campsite again, and I pointed to where he was to go, and he's like, I'm not from from around here. Can you help me get there? Now, this is when I knew something is really up, because there's no way this guy got out here and didn't know where he was. And for that matter, there's no car around. So how did he get here in the first place? I said I was sorry, but I couldn't take him anywhere in a company vehicle. And he's like, please, I really don't know where I am. Can you come with me and help me get there? So now I'm seriously weirded out, and I started wondering if this is some kind of ambush or whatever. I told him I could call him a taxi to come and take him where he wants to go, and I pull out my phone, and he just goes no and walks away really quickly. But he doesn't walk out of the park. He walks back into the effing trees, and I got it right into my effing truck and start to get out of there. F the paint or whatever. I looked in my mirror to see where he was, and as I was leaving, and he was standing right at the tree line again. I don't know how he got there so fast. He was just watching me leave, and right before I turned to the corner, it took a big step back into the trees and kind of dissolved. I guess maybe he was just dark. It was just dark, so he blended in, but it felt more like he was just disappeared. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. This guy encountered this guy out in the world, this weird faceless man. Yet another faceless man encounter was purportedly relayed to the poster from another SA worker, this time a senior officer. The officer claims that this had happened a few years prior. I might have read this story before as well and stuff, because I have a few like this. While out a training mission deep in the woods, at one point he heard someone walking about the camp from inside his tent, and as he first thought it was one of the rookies who had gotten up to go out pee in the woods, but apparently whatever it was just kept getting closer, deeper and deeper into the trees. So the officer got out of his tent to see what was going on, and this is where things would get creepy indeed. The witness would say, I went to the edge of the camp and I called to whoever it was and told them that the camp was this way, and they kept going back out into the woods. So I went after them. I know it was stupid, but I was half asleep, and I just really didn't want to deal with some idiot getting hurt. I followed this thing on a dead straight course for about a mile, and then it stopped on the edge of a little river. I could see the outline of it because the water was reflecting the moon, and it looked just like an ordinary guy. He had a pack on, and it looked like he was facing me. As I asked if he was okay, if he needed help, and he crooked his head like he didn't understand me. I always have my pocket knife on me, and it's got a little nut thumb light attached to it, so I turned that on and lit up his chest so I wouldn't blind him. He was breathing slowly and deep, and so I wondered if he was sleepwalking. I went closer and asked him again if he was okay. I moved the light up, and something didn't seem right, so I stopped. He kept breathing in this real slow, deep breath, and I sort of figured out actually that's what was bothering me. It was like he was pretending to breathe, but not actually doing it. His breaths were too even and deep, and all of his movements were exaggerated, like his shoulders going up and his chest moving. Mm-hmm. I told him to identify himself, and he made this muffled noise. I moved the light up, and I tell you not, this guy had no face, just smooth skin. I freaked out. I sort of effing fumbled my light up. I saw him move toward me, but he didn't actually move. I don't know how to explain it, but one second he was at the edge of the river, and the next he was a few feet from me. I never looked away or blinked. It was like he moved so fast my brain couldn't keep up. I tripped and I fell on my ass, and I could see the line open up on his throat, stretched to his ears, and his head tilted back, and he smiled at me with his throat. There wasn't any blood, just this gaping dark hole, and I swear he smiled at me, gash on his throat. I got up, and I ran as fast as I could back to the camp. Couldn't hear him following me, but I felt like he was always right behind me, even though when I looked back, I couldn't see him. I calmed down. When I got back to camp, the fire was still going, and I guess that pack mentality of being with other people made me stop and breathe. Okay, definitely I've read this article before. The poster has plenty of other stories for along these lines that are quite hard to classify. One very eerie experience happened to him when they successfully found a missing woman they had been searching for. They were happy to have found her, but things were a bit strange that they were expecting. The poster says, one of the scariest things I've ever heard happen to me involved the search of a young woman who had gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at the night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she just kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to the base, the more scared the woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. Hmm. In another incredibly weird report, he says that another team member told him a story that happened while they were out doing a recon for mountain lions, which was very dangerous for hikers and campers. But they go out and scout for signs of the big cats in order to warn people of the vicinity of their presence and close off trails of cat steps if need be. He was out on his own in a very heavy forested part of the dark park towards dusk when he heard the sound like a woman screaming in the distance. Now, as most of you know, when a mountain lion screams, it sounds almost exactly like a woman being brutally murdered. It isn't suddenly, but far from abnormal. But Buddy radioed back, and let Ops know that he'd heard one and that he was going to keep going to see if he could figure out where its territory started. He heard the mountain lion scream a couple of more times, always from the same spot, and determined the approximate area of the mountain lion's territory. He was about to head back when he heard another scream, this time within a few yards of him. Of course, he freaks out and starts heading back at a much faster pace. Mountain lion the last thing he wants to do is run into a mountain lion and get mauled to death. As he got back on the path and started heading back, the scream following him, and he broke into a jog. When he was about a mile from Ops, the scream stopped, and he turned around to see if it was following him. It was almost night by this point, but he said in the distance, just before the path rounded a corner, he could see what looked like a male figure. It called out to them, warning them just the paths were closed and that he needed to come back to the welcome center. The figure just stood there, and my buddy started to walk over. When he was about 10 yards away, the figure took, as he described it, an impossibly long step toward him and let out the same scream Buddy had been hearing. My buddy didn't even say anything. He just turned and sprinted back to Ops, never looking behind him. By the time he got back, the screaming had moved back into the woods, and he didn't mention it to anyone else, just said that there was a mountain lion in the area. They would need to close those paths until the animal would be located and moved, very similarly to this report another mountain lion recon that supposedly went bad, or at the very least went very weird. The poster claims that this came from a colleague who has been out doing the same thing, looking for signs of mountain lions in order to keep the area safe. Colleague said that his partner had gotten a call from there, and indeed mountain lion screams being heard in the area. When they checked it out, he says they found signs around the area like dins and broken branches. He called it all and it explains what happened next. I call in and they tell me to confirm possible, which just means they want you to step in a big pile of S and use that as proof. I'm not seeing any though. So I basically just tell them to shove it. I'm done. We know that damn thing's out there somewhere. Even if I'm stepping in its S or inside its mouth or whatever, guy, I'm not stepping into its S or into anything. Whatever guy I'm with wanders off to take a piss or whatever, as they stay behind watching this little burrow under a tree, see if maybe a fox or something is living under it. Because I love foxes, man. They're cute as hell. But anyways, I'm watching this tree and I start hearing branches crackling, and it's coming from the direction of my partner went up. So now I've got my pistol, but you and I both know that's not going to do S against a cat. I cock it and holler for my partner to get his dumb ass back, but he's too far and he is approaching. And I SU not a man that I just about peed myself. This guy's come towards me. He's back flipping through the effing woods. Like instead of walking, he's doing these crazy effing backflips. And I swear to God, he cleared every effing log and brushed in the path. And he was just like, he knew right where he was going. I yelled at the guy to stop right where he was where he is. I'm posting a gun at him. But he keeps coming, and I just kind of lost it. I shot at the ground in front of him, and he was a dumb effing thing to do. But man, I didn't want this guy somewhere near me. When I fired, he was about 50 yards from me, and as soon as the gun goes off, he rolls around and goes off, backflipping back into the woods. My partner hears my gun go off and runs and asks what's up, and I tell him there's something effing weirdo. There's some effing weirdo out hopped up, and God knows what, and we need to get the F out of Dodge. I let the cops know what happened, and I didn't get any trouble for firing, but man, I didn't know what the mother effer was, but I've never seen anything like it before. Shit. S was absolutely F crazy. Okay. What in the world was going on here? Finally, we have a report that is labeled a possible black-eyed kid, saying, but when seems to be way weirder than the poster explains of this case. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods and calling out in the night, mimicking the sounds of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, camped out in a very remote area and woke up because something was scraping against his head. He thought it was the raccoon or a fox. Until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but leapt back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap gun. And aside, he fired 2 warning shots. And when the sound had faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. The man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As the hunter described it, the man was made of some kind of amalgamation of raw meat, hair, as if someone had skipped up roadkill and molded into the vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came the sound of the gun. The hunter had fired, and it did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. This is quite a lot of extreme insanity. Just what are we to make of all of this? Are these reports real? Is there any? Well, what can we glean? What can we learn from it? There's much more skepticism to make this particular poster because he has posted these not only in normal forums but also on the No Sleep forum, which is typically a red flag for being fiction. However, some of these tales have been confirmed outside of this particular forum, and they have been discussed and picked apart with the poster because becoming nearly legendary in some circles. It seems certainly to take these tales with a grain of salt. At the very least, they are fascinating. They look at internet legends in the making. They are entertaining at the very least. And if they are real, then you have something else to look out for the next time you go out in the dark. Interesting, right there. Let's go look at some more tales. As I said before, we're looking at dark encounters in the night. Let's see. Strange encounters with encounters with the Wendigo. Very creepy encounters with the Pale Walkers. Encounters with the Naughty Kind. Strange encounters with truly enormous UFOs. Okay, let's take a look at this. Maybe not read the whole thing. Coming to the end of this live stream, let's go over here. See if you guys have hit that like button. Oh, good. If you have not yet, folks, please hit that like button. It helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please go share this video on social media. But maybe we'll go over here first. Let me do this. All right. 4 entities from a hidden world in your own. All right. UFOs, aliens, and celebrities. UFO, the mystery of the Hudson Valley. The fire and legendary, disturbing legends and folklore. UFO, extraterrestrial. The best UFO sightings of UFO encounters and physical evidence. All right. Skinwalker Ranch. All right, let's see this over here. Here, let me look at this. Huge rectangular object hovers over Pennsylvania Highway, June 13, 2013. Maybe. Tall, growing humanoid perceived in garage while house hunting. Huh? Crawling humanoid, huh? All right. We could look at that. Or I could go over here. Let's see this truly strange encounters of truly enormous UFOs. Well, giant UFOs, huh? I guess I could look at this. Or I could look over here, maybe go a bit further. The dark history of the mysterious haunted school of nightmares. Strange, some intense and frightening places police encountered with UFOs. When close calls get really weird. Okay, let's see. This close calls get really weird. May have read it before. Let's see. Yeah, some intense and frightening encounters with the police, with UFOs. Among the many witnesses phenomenon, some of them really stand out, and some of the most remarkable these are when the men and women of law enforcement report their encounters with these otherworldly forces. These are people out doing their job to serve and protect, yet sometimes it seems that they come across things that nothing in their experience of training has prepared them for. Here we will look at a few of some of the most terrifying UFO encounters that the police officers have reported, in which the encounter was truly bizarre. All right. For our first case, go back to the 60s on, September 3rd, 65, a Deputy Sheriff Bob Good was out patrol during Highway 35 just outside Damon, Texas, joined by another officer. At around 11 p.m., they already allegedly noticed a purple light off in the distance. As they stared at it, wondering just what they were looking at, and another smaller light reportedly detached from the main body. After which both seemed to hover, the curious officers began taking a series of dark back roads that would take them closer to the strange phenomenon, which they estimated was around 5 or 6 miles away. They got about as close as the roads would have taken them, and stopped the patrol car and rolled once again at those eerily hovering lights. And as they did, they were just startled when two objects came rushing right towards them with breathtaking speed, covering several miles within seconds. The objects then seemed to be positioning themselves directly overhead, bathing in the same landscape in bright purple, like the light day, like morning and stuff. That seemed to be directly overhead, but the entire landscape, like daytime on some, like a daytime on some alien world, and they could see the heat emanating from them. McCoy would say the larger object was as big as a football field. Later say of the frightening experience. The bulk of the object was plainly visible at the time and appeared to be triangular shaped and a bright purple light. Sorry if I'm a bit tired, folks, but we're talking about strange encounters in the dark night. How people encounter strange phenomena out of the woods or out where people don't usually go. So let's get back to this article. The left end of the smaller, less bright blue. On the right end, the bulk of the object appeared to be dark gray in color. With no other distinguishing feature. It appears to be about 200 feet wide and 450 feet thick in the middle, tapering off both towards ends. There was no noise at all, tail. The bright purple light illuminated the ground directly underneath it and the area in front of it, including the highway and the interior of our patrol car. The tall grass under the object did not appear to be disturbed. There was a bright moon out, and it cast a shadow and object on the ground and immediately blew it up in the grass. Very, very interesting. The two men tore out of there, and after a few moments of having the lights shut off back to their original position, the two officers stopped once more to observe them, but the chances of a repeat of what had happened by Major Lawrence, Lieutenant General Earleton, Air Force. The They would later be interviewed by Major Lawrence Leach Jr., Lawrence Leach of Elton Air Force, who dreamed them, Elton Air Base, which deemed them to be very sincere and sound of judgment. Studying, there's no doubt in my mind they definitely saw something unusual, or saw some unusual object or phenomenon. A couple of years later, in 1967, we have the hand of Patrolman Herb Schimmer, who was a police officer in Ashland, Nebraska. On the evening of December 3rd of that year, he was on his usual patrolling. He was in his usual patrol, and things were pretty routine. And he noticed the two red lights over Highway 63, which he at first took to be the lights of a big rig truck. At first, still felt off about it, and so he drove off towards the light to investigate, and soon, realizing that this was no truck. According to the Schimmer, the red lights were red, and the lights were red. Lost my place. Sorry about that. To be lights. At first, something felt off about it towards the lights, and investigated soon, realizing that there was no truck. According to Schimmer, the red lights were in fact emanating from what looked to be portholes or of a metallic semi. Interesting. Just over Highwood, from they got closer, you could see that it's some kind of lean gear. As they got closer, you could see that it's some sort of walkway around some kind of landing gear dangling from the bottom. The object would then float upwards and speed off into the distance. This is where things would get bizarre. Although nothing else seemed to have happened at the time, a look at the clock showed that it was nearly 3 a.m., which was odd because he had only just started approaching the objects around 10 minutes before. As he drove back into the station, the bewildering sense of lost time intruded upon his thoughts, and he also began to feel physically ill. Something was itchy on his neck, and he reached around to feel a larger bolt that he cannot explain. Schimmer would also report the whole crazy encounter, and this caught the attention of UFO research. They caught the attention of UFO research organization called Condon Commission, who believed that he had possibly been abducted. Let me read how far we have left of this. Maybe not that far. All right. Let's get here. A hypnosis session was organized, during which Schimmer described being rendered paralyzed and unable to remove his sidearm. Shortly after stopping his vehicle, he was then apparently beamed aboard the craft and telepathically communicated by humanoid beings in uniform bearing wing insignia, who claimed to draw power from lines and to be from the planet Venus. Schimmer would go on to pull the first several moments later, due to post-traumatic stress from his experience and recurring physical problems within the community, and his wife eventually left him because he could not stop talking about the UFO he had seen. From his experience and recurring physical problems, in the meantime, he was apparently the object of ridicule within the community. His wife eventually left him. He could not stop talking about the UFO he had seen. In the 1970s, we have the frightening encounter relayed by an officer of Carmen, California. It was a little after 3:30 a.m. on May 13th, 1978, when the guy was on a routine patrol and noticed a circular type thing similar to a round fireball or a setting sun about 100 to 100 feet off the ground. Thinking this was maybe a fire, he got closer to investigating what he took to be a fire. To be a tree on fire, suddenly lifted off the ground, and the amazed officer quickly trained his searchlight on the object and was met with a bright blue flash, after which whatever it was sped off. There was the flash soon out to have been perhaps some sort of weapon. as the officer claims. Okay. He was left with burns on his face and on the rest of his body, which he would say it was like a sunburn when you fell asleep on the pool. There were quite white blisters on parts of my body for facing that light. I also had trouble with sunlight. It was like right after you have your eyes checked and they are sensitive to light. That lasted about a week. When doctors examined him, they came to the conclusion these particular burns seemed to have been caused by microwaves, although no one could figure out how it had happened. An investigation of the area of the purported encounter would turn up on a circle of dead vegetation where it is claimed that nothing would grow for years after, though now it is apparently an almond orchid. What happened here? Who knows? The following year, we have a somewhat similar type of encounter reported by Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson of Marshall County, Minnesota, August 27th, 1979. Johnson was in patrol near the North Dakota border when he saw a strange light apparently off in the wilderness. As he took a side road to get closer, the light apparently began to approach his car at an amazing rate. Of speed. It seemed to have almost to be on a collision course, and Johnson lost consciousness after being blinded by a bright flash to the sound of breaking glass. When he came to, he was still sitting in his stalled car, happy to be alive, but all alarmed that he could not see anything. Oddly, his car had traveled some distance from where the object had engaged him, and he would say this bizarre experience. I noticed a very bright light, 8 to 12 inches in diameter, 3 to 4 feet off the ground. The edges were very defined. I thought perhaps at first it could be an aircraft in trouble, as it appeared to be a landing light from an aircraft. I proceeded towards on 220 on Highway 220. Proceeded about a mile on a road named 220. I proceeded about a mile, and there 3/10 of the mile and 4/10 were when the light intercepted my vehicle, causing damage to my headlight, putting a dent in my hood, breaking the windshield, and bending antennas on top of the vehicle. At this point of the interception of the light, I was rendered either unconscious, neutralized, or unknowingly for a period of approximately 39 minutes. From this point of intersection, my police vehicle proceeded south in a strange line, 854 feet, at which point the brakes were engaged by forces unknown to myself. I do not remember doing this, and I left about approximately 99 feet of black marks in the highway before coming to rest sideways in the road with a grill on my hood facing entirely, with the facing in an easterly direction. No, I need to reread that. At this point, the brakes were engaged and showing antennas on top of the vehicle. At this point, in the interception of light, rendered either unconscious, neutralized, or unknowing for a period of approximately 39 minutes. From this point of intersection, my police vehicle proceeded south in a straight line, 854 feet, at which point the brakes were engaged by forces unknown to myself, as I do not remember doing I remember doing any of this, and I left about approximately 99 feet of black marks on the highway before coming to a rest sideways in the road, with my grill on my hood, facing it in an uneasy direction at 2:29 a.m. I rated to 1088. Officer needs assistance to my dispatcher in Warren. The officer called out to his radio for help, and he was rushed to the hospital for what looked like burns on his face and irritation of the eyes. Meanwhile, the patrol car he had been in was found to have smashed in right-side headlight, a crack in the windshield, and the driver's side, and an unusual circular dent on the hood. Also, on the driver's side and roof antenna that was bent over at a 60-degree angle, the windshield was particularly weird, as it seemed to have sustained inward and outward forces, out inward and acting almost simultaneously. All of the damage was on the driver's side of the vehicle. The interior colors were around to be 14 minutes slow, and Nodley Johnson's wristwatch had the same anomaly. People who examined the vehicle would be unable to explain the particular damage it incurred, and it did not seem to be any normal collision, with the official explanation being mechanical forces of unknown origin. Luckily, his eyes would heal, and he would regain his eyesight. Okay. Today's just been a few of the more remarkable and harrowing encounters that officers of the law have faced through. There are a few more that come from where that came from. It's interesting to note that these are seasoned professionals out on patrol, not looking for the mysterious and certainly more or less considered to be reliable witnesses than most. We are left to wonder just what would cause them to risk their reputations and standing to come forward to report these things. And if they were simply tall tales, why would they do such a thing? Considering the police agrees in these cases, it certainly leads them to a bit of added weight. Yeah, that's true as well, folks. We had a great live stream tonight. Let's see, have you guys hit that like button for me? Not doing too bad there. Please, folks, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yeah, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read Comics They're Bad For You. Remember, the there is misspelled. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that like button, because it helps me fight the algorithm so more people can see my content, as well as please go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. Leave some comments down below, because I'd love to hear from you guys. And please go and, well, what else is there? Leave some comments on that. Go share this video on Twitter and Facebook and Gab. Go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. Oh, yeah. Also, please go over to Stitch Together Picks. Stitch Together Picks is a YouTube channel that deserves far more subscribers. You're going to love his reviews of movies. They are great. Watching Stitch Together Picks is just a good time. Go and subscribe to Stitch. Let's go over that again, huh? Go and subscribe to Stitch Together Picks. As well as go over and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. Creepy Little Book is like the Art Bell radio show. He does live streams every night. He also releases small videos talking about high strangeness. He live streams on weekdays at 12:30 a.m. You hear that? On weekdays, he live streams at 12:30 a.m. and on weekends, he live streams at 10 o'clock p.m. He talks about aliens and ghosts, and you learn so much. Also, please go over to rumble.com and subscribe to my Rumble channel. The name of my Rumble channel is Comic Freak, as well as go over to BitChute and subscribe to my BitChute channel. It is also named Comic Freak. Remember, folks, I'll be back again tomorrow around 11 o'clock p.m. for another live stream, so be sure to come back. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me.